And Michael Verney from The Independent here in studio. I will give you your headlines first of all. We might as well start with something relevant to the game today. Sunday Independent go big with their picture. It's Stephen Cluxton and team walking out at Croke Park. Day of Destiny, the headline. Our greatest fear is to be made look bad in public. Kerry wouldn't be human if they didn't have those thoughts. That's Joe Brolly on the front page summing up how Kerry might approach today. For all the positivity, for all the hope, they will have a nagging fear that today could turn ugly.
Could I cut across you before you get to the other ones? If I was from Kerry, I'll just hold that up, and I saw that page, I would be disgusted. I'd be very riled up. It's just a picture of Dublin in All-Ireland final day on your main page.
They're the story,
There's only one
though.
team. There's only one team.
The 5 in a row is the story. It supersedes
I agree.
All-Ireland.
It's a big story, but if it was my own county going in against Dublin today, I would go,
More motivation, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. Sun then, back page of the Sun on Sunday. Give me 5. Not a Kerry man in sight in the back page of the Sun either, Kieran. There you go.
They did well find that picture of Cluxton, in fairness, actually embracing or showing emotion.
Yeah.
Clux is the reason for Dub's success. That's Paddy Christie talking here about the importance of Cluxton to this team. The Sunday Times on All-Ireland football final day. All-Ireland football final day. The Sunday Times.
The big one.
Jacob Stockdale.
The big
It's not
one.
even a World Cup match.
It was El Clasico. El Clasico of warm-up matches.
Goodness me. That can't be right, can it? And then just to make things worse, the picture over here, the other story, Joe Schmidt. And the story which has the prominence here on All-Ireland football final day, Schmidt picking squad is horrible.
Yeah,
That's a
and even the
strange
blurbs, Liverpool Burnley gets as much as Dublin Kerry.
Yeah. Victory in Cardiff gives World Cup boost, but Ireland still have a way to go. Heart and soul. Jacob Stockdale, by the way, brilliant again yesterday. Goodness me. They do, by the way, in fairness, on their front page of their main section, their lead on the sport there is obviously Dublin and the All-Ireland final. Where we go next? Sunday World. Dubs, Conman. This is Conor Callaghan.
No Kerry man on the back page again?
No care. Well, there's a lot there.
Spillane, yeah.
Spillane saying, I've never looked forward to a match as much. Interesting. Dubs Conman, talented tricksters O'Callaghan and Mannion to give high five to history. This is Charlie Redmond, who does a fantastic interview inside, which we'll get to. Really, really good. We're going to try, I appreciate lots of you will be watching this after the All-Ireland final, so we're going to steer away from the prediction side of things and just talk about the best pieces in the paper. So if you're just started listening and you're thinking, this is dated, probably, we'll try and steer away from that. Obviously, I'll get predictions from the lads before we go. Give me 5. This is the Racing Post. There's a piece in here we want to come to. I know we don't usually show the Racing Post. Dublin preparing for a date with Destiny, and picture of Mannion there. Look at this, Kerry on the back page. There you go. Who do we have there? Gainey and Cluxton. The Immortals, history beckons for awesome Dubs, but Kerry won't roll over, is how they're pitching things. Inside, they boast an exclusive interview with Padraig Harrington, talking about his love affair with Dublin and the GAA, which was an interesting idea, and a few other bits and pieces as well. Then more football stuff towards this end. Sunday Mirror, Pog deal blow, United face battle to keep Star long-term with Madrid, his dream. And then the Sunday People, Sadio Mane not happy yesterday at Selfish Salah. And then Clueless, Emmanuel Petit has called Unai Emery clueless regarding his team selection. Arsenal play in the North London derby this afternoon. So there we are. All-Ireland football final day.
Yeah.
We have too much to pick from.
Yeah. Yeah, where will we start?
What do you fancy?
One of the things I would have to say, but when it's Dublin v Kerry, much as as when it's Tipperary v Kilkenny in hurling, in a way for journalists, often your heart sinks because you think, what else is there to say? Is there anything new you can say? And what is remarkable that people found a lot of stuff to say about Tipperary, Kilkenny, and particularly Dublin Kerry this week. Particularly today's papers and yesterday's papers have been really strong, really good original ideas and a lot of thought put into it. It's a big challenge. Like, it's not easy when there's been documentaries about this rivalry. There's been loads of books written on it. There's been every angle under the sun seemed to be covered, but one of the pieces that jumps out is I read it online earlier and I didn't realise, I was wondering was it in the Sunday World, but it is. Roy Curtis done a brilliant interview with Charlie Redmond, who would have been an icon of Dublin football in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it's just very raw and very about the passing of his wife. I didn't realise Charlie's wife had died. And she had a brain tumour, and he goes into the impact that had. Like the daughter was only 16 when it happened, and it's a really brilliant piece. It's it shows a couple of things. Like Roy doesn't do many interviews. Roy Curtis. It shows to me that Roy should do more interviews because it's a really good interview. He's very good at it. It shows as well that Charlie is a columnist with the Sunday World. So you might think. Some people might have picked that up and think, why are you interviewing your columnist? And it shows that great stuff can be under your nose. Like there is deeper stuff there all the time. But of all the pieces that's around today, it's probably the most compelling to me, I have to say.
It took me back, I must say. Really just shocked me how raw it was, how sad it was. It's a terribly sad piece. There is a picture of Roy Curtis and Charlie there. I'll hold it up, you can kind of see it. So they're having a pint.
Yeah.
That's the setting for the interview, which belies what they're talking about.
Well, part of it shows the importance of having a relationship with somebody. Like Roy knows Charlie for over 25 years. So, like, if I went to Charlie, I've met Charlie very briefly a couple of times. I don't think I would have got that. No. But when you know somebody a long time, you can get them to open up a lot more. Yeah.
To give you a sense, so he opens in the usual kind of way, Roy, and talks about the free-taking routine. It was as choreographed as Riverdance. 3 licks of the gloves. Even that makes you feel nostalgic, doesn't it? Yeah. 3 licks of the gloves. I mean, the most pointless part of the routine you can imagine.
And Michael Marherty used to go around the house and mind the dresser. I think that was his description of the routine. 7
steps back, 2 to the left. The fingless Michael Flatley. Talks about all the, the usual, the blockbuster against Meath in 91, and they were bigger than U2 for a time. So then you get a sense that this piece isn't going the way you think it might. Talks about meeting his wife. She was a maternity nurse, he was a firefighter, and they married and things went well, 3 daughters. And then at some stage she would start mixing up her words. She would say fat instead of math, small things I didn't pay too much attention. And Curtis makes the point, life as a firefighter had conditioned him against overreaction. Many times Charlie says you'd be resuscitating and the patient wouldn't make it. You've given them your best shot, you have to walk away. A couple of cases I walk away in tears. They all involve kids. I still remember them. The day of the week, the location. They don't leave you ever. When a 12-year-old dies in your arms, that's not nice. When you get a 4-year-old who's due to go back to South Africa in 3 days and gets knocked down and he's going back in a coffin, those things don't ever leave you. And when you're dealing with young children, it cuts into you. So that's a heavy enough thought as well from his professional point of view. Holidays 2013, and Roy writes that in his gut, Charlie knew there was trouble. Violent headaches, confusion, coordination issues, knocking over glasses. Talks about how they plug into the GAA community. Rang Jerry McEntee, his old Meath rival, master surgeon, MRI scan. Soon David Hickey of the 1970s, surgeon, was by their side. And then, this is the kind of horrible thought. She had the scan on a Friday. They operated on Monday, her birthday. On Wednesday, 2013, she was told she had 18 months to live. And that's when it just, and it continues on, and he's incredibly open, and all the things around it. Like initially we didn't tell our parents.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Actually, to think that, isn't it? Yeah.
My mother and her father died not knowing, he says.
But that's an interesting one now, because I lost my brother to cancer young, and he didn't want my parents to know. A lot of people, eventually they knew just at the very end, very close to it, but it was terminal for a few months. And I think people are very conscious of the impact that losing a kid will have on parents, and they don't want to put them through it. And I remember we had conversations with us, and you have to tell them. And he said, no, it's my decision, I really don't want them to know. And I can understand how that happened in Charlie's case, and his wife's case.
Is that a case of, I suppose, cherishing the time you have with them and not having a negative cloud hanging over? Is that kind of the viewpoint, I suppose? Because they would have really enjoyed their time together. There would have been nothing going on in the background. Exactly. Yeah.
But it's a hard one I can imagine it's a very hard one to gauge as well, because if you know if you know there's 18 months, do you have more time to get used to it, or does if you're only told late on, or you're not told, is it more of a shock when it happens? So it's a dilemma for a lot of families. It's not unique.
There's no good way, is there?
Yeah.
So, as he says, we didn't tell the parents. My mother and her father died not knowing. So I thought, maybe you take comfort from that.
Yeah.
Though he says her mother's still alive. My father has since passed. He says it was bad enough telling the kids, but telling her mother, an old woman, ... Jesus, is all he can say about that. And then just talked about the ordeal it was, chemo every second week. In the end, she couldn't get up the stairs, and they decided just to leave the chemo and see it out. In December 2016, 3 years after being given the 18 months to live, she passed away. So it's just, because I have a feeling we had Charlie at a big roadshow.
You did, yeah. I was at it before one of the All-Ireland finals, yeah.
I think that could have been 2016.
Mm.
Maybe it was 17 now, or it could have been 16. Maybe it was 17.
One of the Mayo games. I think it could have been 17.
Maybe it was 17. Like, you'd have no sense that 8 months previously he had gone through this horror. Like, you just never know with people.
No, and like people can always put on a public face, and often, to be honest, with grief, it takes a while for it to hit home. It can take years sometimes. You know, people often, particularly when you have kids, they just drive on and think, you know, I have to put on a front here, and then it can just knock them back a couple of years later. So.
Yeah. And then, you know, it's dripping with nostalgia then. And today he's going to travel from his home in Ashbourne with Mick Deegan, his club mate and brother-in-law. They'll have a pre-match pint in Clonliffe House and enjoy the atmosphere. He's a Celtic nut as well. He'll keep an eye on the Old Firm game. And then, you know, reminiscent, there's great stories about in their day, they'd meet at Croker 70 minutes before the All-Ireland final and be trying to get through traffic. And he talks about, like, you'd come to police. Myself, Digo, Robbie Boyle would drive to the All-Ireland final, crazy traffic. Digo had an aunt who lived on Fitzroy Avenue, so we try and park there. We get stopped by the cops. We're players, let us through. Right, Ted, of course you're. You're not the first one to say that today. F off, lads, we're playing in the All-Ireland final, let us through. Which is just incredible. And, you know, even he can laugh at how laissez-faire the whole thing was.
Well, it was completely different. Like, I don't know if you remember after the 96 All-Ireland final, the famous replay between Meath and Mayo where they had the row, but Tommy Dowd was a Meath captain. And there used to be a reception, a lunch the following day for both teams. Yeah. So it was Meath and Mayo supposed to meet up, and Tommy Dowd was the captain, turned up with Sam Maguire, and he wasn't let into Croke Park. And he had, because he didn't have the right pass. So Sean Boylan had to go out, and I think Sean went ballistic. It's like he's got this big shiny trophy. Who do you think he is?
There's a great one in '95 about Offaly had their preparations and all out in the Spa Hotel, and the team bus left without Brian Whelan. So he had to get a taxi from Spa Hotel into Croke Park in the midst of all the traffic, and he was telling the taximan that he was playing, and sure, the taximan didn't know him from Adam, obviously didn't believe him or anything like that. Like, it just shows you the crazy things. And even the boys parking up in Fitzroy Avenue, like we usually got a parking space there, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's mad. There's a great line as well. There's a couple of great lines about Charlie's Croker pre-match routine. He just says, I always used to get sick in the dressing room. It just happened one day. I got sick before the match. I felt it cleared me out and I was ready to play. I didn't vomit a huge volume. It was just to clear myself out. I'd have a little sleep for 10 to 15 minutes as well. Then got changed, into the toilet, get sick, and I'd be ready to go. And I can actually kind of relate to it, because you talk to players before big matches and they just think they almost, like, it's like their body is preparing themselves for war, and it's like they nearly want to be empty almost and have nothing in there. It's crazy, like.
It came to a running joke in my football days. I would want to go to the toilet, you know, properly, close, and it would always be like, I used to cut it so fine. It was just, it was like, come on, it's nearly ready. We just need to. It needs to go. And never puking though. Like, everything about puking tells you you're completely drained.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing you can do.
But it's something to just thinking back to dressing rooms. I'm sure it was a dressing room you were in as well, Michael. You'd always remember, I remember the sound of retching. There would be some people that would go in and get sick before every game.
It just it just feels like you're preparing your body, and you have no excess inside you. You're ready to go. There's actually a story about a fella. He actually played for Galway at one stage. Played senior. He was playing a fresher match in NUIG or GMIT, I think, and he actually had to, before the start of the match, he just had to go to the toilet like literally a minute before the match. And he ended up like being gone for like the first 10 or 15 minutes of the match because he had to. His body had to be prepared. You know,
you can't be running around. It's no good. You know. Interestingly, by the way. He talks about midfielders. Mullins is the best midfielder I'd ever seen, but Brian Fenton is better than Mullins, and I never thought I'd ever say that. Says Charlie Redmond.
Yeah, I think quite a few people are coming around to that now, to be honest.
Brian Fenton is
just so consistent.
Yeah. He's the same as Bomber in 82. Fenton has not lost the championship game. It's just like that beggars belief, really. And the Bomber was the same heading into 82. So he doesn't know what it's like to lose a match. And if they were to lose today, imagine your first game to be beaten in is 5 in a row, like, as well. It's just the significance of it is huge.
Yeah, you'd be inclined to tell him it won't always be this bad when we lose a match.
if we lose a match.
Yeah, well, yeah, he may. Who knows how long he'll go on for. There's a good profile piece of Conor O'Callaghan by
Mick Foley.
Foley in the Sunday Times.
Yeah. It was interesting. I enjoyed that piece. I remember actually it was 2 years ago. Kula did some kind of sponsorship launch. I think it was a Davy Stockbrokers or somewhere. But Conor O'Callaghan was one of the people there, and he was wearing a suit and tie. I remember, but I noticed he was wearing Kula socks. I just thought it was very interesting. So, dressing up in a suit and tie, he was wearing Kula.
Not like
club socks.
Not the socks you'd wear in a match.
Yeah. As far as I could see, they were, yeah.
Common enough even in school, like we would often wear
in school, yeah.
School, but when you're wearing a suit and tie, whatever job
I don't think as an adult it's the done thing, is it?
Yeah.
Maybe he was going to a training that evening or something, ready to go.
There's some great stuff in it though, like, and even just when you think about how young he is, but how long he has been around and what he's achieved. Like, just going through, like Foley just talks about, in 2017 alone, O'Callaghan pulled in All-Ireland hurling titles with Kula and then with Dublin, under-21 and senior, provincial titles, under-21 and senior, and All-Star, was named Young Footballer of the Year and only lost a single competitive game. The following year he had a National League title and a Sigerson medal with UCD. Where could he go from there? And that's what you're kind of thinking. Like, it's almost like he's done everything. How can he, like, get better? Surely he'll tail off a bit, or confidence might drop a bit, or something might happen. No, he's turned into an absolute phenomenon now, and he's better than ever now. And God help whoever has to pick him up on the club scene.
Well, like, it wouldn't surprise me when they finish up that they'll be talking about him as their best forward, as the greatest forward they've ever had. Because I think the greatest forward Dublin have ever had is Bernard Brogan. Like, what he done for such a long, long time was amazing. And he's not on the bench today, so I would say that's it with him. Like, he's 35 years old.
He's not on the bench.
No,
he's not on the bench. So I would say that's the end of it. Bernard,
that's a tough day. That's a rotten day for him, isn't it?
And like Rory O'Carroll isn't, Owen O'Gara isn't, Eric Lowndes. Like, that shows Jim Gavin there's no sentiment. You know,
there should be unlimited bench for All Ireland final day. You feel?
I wouldn't disagree with that. It's very harsh. It's very harsh on the 36 guys. Like,
I don't see why not just give them they have the option to use their 6 subs, but you can pick from the panel. Like, why should it be restricted? I don't really get that.
It's an awful predicament to put everyone in.
Yeah.
God, that's such a tough day.
Yeah, and even things like if they win, you're not on the photo. Like, if they do the extended squad photo, it is only the 26, and like, you've been there busting your gut. And it comes back to the thing as well, the Diarmuid Connolly question. There's 3 or 4 forwards haven't made the bench, and just over a month ago, Diarmuid was in Dublin Airport trying to go to Boston to play football. So. You'd wonder if he comes on today, which I think he could come on fairly early, with not like in the last couple of minutes like the last day. I think he could be on with 20, 25 minutes to go. You'd wonder how some of the other guys looking on, they might be questioning things a little bit. Remember Tommy Walsh talking last year about Con, just on Con, saying he was the best hurler in Ireland. This is a guy who's never played inter-county hurling.
I remember I was watching that morning, the lads, so were like, who's the best hurler in the country at the moment? And he was like, probably Conor O'Callaghan. Joking.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Isn't it?
You're joking. Because it says here, Kula obviously have won 2 All-Ireland titles, 2017, 2018. And there's a painting theme here, by the way. If you read the piece, you'll get it. It's well worth a read. His sister did a fantastic painting of Con when he was a teenager. Yeah,
that was good detail that Mick got. I never knew that. She was an NCAD, and it's reproduced.
It's worth a look. Picture, He was ripped as a teenager, you won't be surprised to learn, is the point as well. But anyway, it says hurling offered him a different canvas. That's the painting theme. But in a challenge game early in 2017, when Tipperary were All-Ireland champions, he took James Barry for 6 points. He tortured Killian Buckley as well in a Leinster Championship game the day after collecting an All-Star. Have you seen him play hurling?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Up close and personal?
Yeah, see, he actually played wing forward for Kula when they were beaten the first Leinster final by Owlert, I think it was. And then they moved him closer to goals. He's probably not naturally the most skillful person, so he's not going to like strike a ball on the run over the bar from 80 yards, but inside 45 yards, he's like, if he gets the ball in his hand, he's nigh on unstoppable. Like, he's so powerful, he's so clinical. Same as in football, he only sees goals. Like, he only sees goals, and that just puts the heebie-jeebies down any defender, really.
Mick says he aimed high for his leaving cert. He smashed through 500 points. Paul Flynn remembers getting a dunt off him in training. I was winded for about half an hour. I was running around training, pretending I wasn't hurt. He has that inner strength, not just the strength you get from doing weights. The point of the piece, Kieran, and it ties in with what you say, the point of the piece really is that in barely 3 years with Dublin, he has already become the perfect reflection of the team's soul, is what Mick writes. what we're saying here.
Just what Paul Flynn says as well. I think Con was only in the squad maybe 6 weeks to 2 months, and there was a bit of he was marking, I think, Philly, and there was a bit of they were getting physical or whatever. And I remember someone retelling the story to me, and Con was basically given as good as he got, and it was basically like dropped kind of jaws on the floor almost. I was like, this guy's going to be here for the long haul. Like, this guy's like, he doesn't care. Like,
yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's man of the match today. I mean, he's a massive game because he is an ultimate big game player. Like Lee Keegan nobody had ever scored a goal from play on Lee Keegan in Championship football before the semi-final. He got 2 goals off him. And it's worth, I actually looked at last year's final during the week, and there was very little talk about him after. He wasn't nominated for man of the match, but that 10-12 minute spell against Tyrone in the first half where they won the game, really, he was outstanding. He was brilliant then. And he's just... there's so much talk about matchups everywhere. I don't think Kerry have anyone who can mark him. They really don't.
It's funny, I can't even remember who said it, but there's so much talk during the week, and it was the most like out of the Moneyball old men in the sitting around a table spouting nonsense kind of thing, and someone said, well look, Con scored 2 goals in the semi-final, so he's not going to do that again in the final.
Yeah.
Really?
Make it 3.
He might, I think he really might.
Yeah.
last year was funny. He was kind of a marked man last year, so I actually felt most of the time when he got the ball he was doing a lot of selfless stuff, because he usually had 2 lads covering him a lot of the time because he was marked from the year before, and he was bringing someone else into the game. He wasn't necessarily putting up big scores. He didn't score that much last year. The Ireland final you mentioned was his best game last year.
Okay.
And it's like this year, that was like, he was a marked man. People knew what he was going to do. He got extra attention. So he kind of changed his game. Now he's changed his game again.
Yeah.
And he's gone back to the more of a predator again. Like, it just shows you, like, and that's how they adapted. That's how he adapted to the pressure.
Like, he's a thoroughly modern footballer. Like, he could play anywhere from 10 to 15 because, when he has played on the edge of the square as a more or less conventional full forward, his spring is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then you see when he lands and he takes a step back, or, he's so many little clever tricks to make the space for the shot or the pass.
Was it him who went up for that ball and landed on his leg, and you just thought his ligaments are gone?
Yeah. It was unbelievable.
That was almost one of the most impressive athletic feats I've seen.
He landed on one leg, wasn't it, Jen?
At a bad angle. It should have jarred.
Yeah.
The strength of around the knee must have just kept him somehow intact.
Yeah. He has that feistiness as well. You saw after he got the 2 goals against Mayo. Like, Lee Keegan was obviously in his ear. That's what you do when you're marking a man. Yeah. You could just see he made a point of saying it to him after. He
needs to keep shaving his head. He needs to go all out. It's brilliant. It just looks great.
There's a few other things on that spread just before we move on. Joe, one is a Christy O'Connor piece, but I just thought there was a little details here because this stuff rarely comes out, and I'd be curious how Christy got wind of it. But it's after the league game in Tralee in February. There was a row at the end, but he's saying there was a row at half time as well. One of the Kerry players somehow ended up in the Dublin dressing room, and as he was coming out, some of the Dublin players rattled him against the door, and then afterwards one of the Dublin players roared, "See us in September," at the end of the row. So it's interesting where there's a bit of edge there, and
did very well to stay quiet for so long.
Yeah. But there's interesting thing. Like, do you remember there was a tumultuous league game between Donegal and Dublin and Balbafay when there was accusations of a bite and Patrick McBurty, but there was a massive row at half time at that. But Damon McGee tells a great story about that the Dublin they just sensed there was somebody at the door, and the Donegal dressing room at half time, and they opened the door, and Bernard Dunn was at the door, apparently trying to listen in to what they were saying. So Neil McGee went ballistic and wanted to go into the Dublin dressing room, and they would have called him like, he's a former world champion boxer, have a bit of cover, just let him go.
Let me just say as well, in Bernard Dunn's defence, he may have been walking by the door, may not have been trying to listen in. There could have been a misunderstanding there, so we'll take McGee's word for it, but only... That's
part of a role as a performance and lifestyle coach, whatever that is.
Yeah. So, beware the... Okay, if I was watching now and I heard mention of 1982, I would instantly say, I've had too much in 1982. It has no relevance to today and this Dublin machine. So we've set the threshold very high, and there are just 2 pieces, and one of them has fantastic stuff on Mick O'Dwyer and how badly he took 82. It's great. And then the other is a Dennis Walsh piece where he just gives great colour around Kerry at that time. We might start with the Tommy Doyle piece. I know you thought it was very good, Michael. It is very good. It's in the Mail on Sunday. So we all know Seamus Darby. Tommy Doyle is the man who was marking him. And he talks about the fallout from 82. And then when they lost again in 83 to Cork, and there's just great stuff in it, and how Miko took it, I suppose.
Yeah, Micheál Clifford obviously went and met Tommy Doyle, and it's like, when Tommy Doyle is contacted about the interview, he obviously knows, like, straight away, like, there's going to be an elephant in the room. So he's going to have to ask him about that push or whatever, the nudge. It was only a nudge, obviously, by the way, as well. And he just says, I don't think too much about it. Watch too much about it or talk too much about it. Even if I was given €1 for every time I was asked about it, I would have a couple of lottos won, which is fair enough. But the best stuff is when he starts going on about 83 and when they were beaten surprisingly by a late goal against Cork. And I suppose he was a salesman at the time, and he used to have to go into Waterville and go to all the different, like, pubs and shops and hotels and stuff like that.
He was a wine rep, and so, like, Miko owns a pub and a hotel.
Yeah, like, he's basically, like, one of your best customers. Yeah. And he just talks about going through Waterville. So he just talks about here, we were really dejected, and I know I was saying to myself, is that it now? And you were wondering, what is Miko going to do? And for 2 months, I would go through Waterville. I would call into every business except Miko's because I did not want to meet him. I was too embarrassed. I was half afraid, half ashamed. I was ashamed, and there is no other way of putting it, because we had been beaten again by a last-minute goal for a second time inside a year. It is nobody's fault. You were just beaten, but it's just how you feel. And then the summer kind of crawled on, and he said one day I got a hoot from the White Mark, and out came the head. I didn't see you in ages. Why aren't you calling in? And then they went for a cup of tea in one of the nearby hotels, and basically Miko told him that we were only getting started. Like, the meeting is, so why hadn't you called in? And he goes, I went over and I said, Miko, honestly, I'm embarrassed. Yeah. Which is, and Mick O'Dwyer's response was, he opened the door, he said, hop in. They went to the Strand Hotel, private room, cup of tea. And, like, you feel sort of sorry for Tommy Doyle, because he turns to Miko at one point in the meeting and he says, is it all over? Yeah, like a child, like
parent, like, tell me, is it over? And Miko says, by God, if Dublin come in the All-Ireland with 12 men, we can surely win one with 15, because obviously Dublin won that year against Galway. I went into that room dejected, I left high, drove home, and I went off training for 2 hours that evening on my own. We're back, like, we're on.
Because I've always thought that was Miko's greatest achievement with Kerry.
To get them back.
Because after 82 and 83, they came back to do another 3 in a row, and a 3 in a row was still an immense achievement. And it was largely a new team. Like, there was a core of 5 or 6 players that were there from the earlier team, but there was a lot of new, and a lot of the newer players that were in weren't superstars. Like, some of them were okay, they were decent players, but they weren't at the caliber for this left. But he still got a 3 in a row out of them.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most interesting things about Kerry as well. Obviously the 4 in a row and beaten for the 5 in a row, and then beaten again the year after, last minute goal, and then they were able to come back and win 3. Like, so it'd just be interesting. Like, just say if Dublin were beaten today, do they bounce back and win another 2 or 3?
Yes.
Or if they win today, do they win 6 and 7, and then maybe that's it for a while? Or
well, it's something. There's a piece there by Dennis Walsh, and it's actually. It's something that I think will happen. I think you are going to have an era of Dublin-Kerry dominance again, because I think the profile, I think that Kerry team are a bit too young and a bit off in their physical development at the moment. They just need another year or 2. But I think Dublin aren't going to go anywhere, even though I expect quite a few to retire. But a lot of them that retire will be fringe players. And the big question is whether Jim Gavin stays on.
Yeah.
I know he agreed another 3 years last year, but I think some people think that might have been just to preempt any questions about his future this summer, because it is such a significant summer. But Dennis goes into this, there was this general feeling back in the early 80s, unless Kerry stop football, will we be ruined? Once they were beaten, it was like martial law had been lifted. And people forget what it was like then, because I saw the crowds around 82 semi-finals being referenced, because I think there was only 17,000 in one when it was used to tie in with this year's semi-final. But it was very different then, because Connacht and Ulster teams were complete also-rans. Like, Ulster went 23 years without winning All-Ireland. Connacht went 32. And whenever they got All-Ireland semi-finals, they were cannon fodder. Unless they were playing each other, then they had a chance to get the final, where they'd be cannon fodder in the final. And I remember there was no, like, I didn't go to an inter-county match till I was 23. You had no interest in the inter-county game because it was irrelevant to you. You hadn't a chance of winning. You were all focused on your club and trying to win a county title. inter-county football just seemed to be the domain of Dublin Kerry. Then when they slipped away, of Cork and Meath, that they just stepped into that breach. And that's why the early 90s was so remarkable.
Right.
It suddenly seemed anybody could win.
Right, okay.
You know.
By the way, just as a brief aside, Tommy Doyle there, as a young man, I thought it was Robert De Niro. Absolute ringer as a young man for Robert De Niro.
It is actually, yeah.
Unbelievable.
You talking to me?
Yeah, it's like De Niro's lifting the Sam Maguire. Sorry, I'll hold it up properly. I'm not showing it to the camera there, so you can kind of zoom in as much as you can. But it's literally like De Niro is lifting the Sam Maguire there.
Yeah, well, I'm wearing Mean Streets heroes. Yeah.
Anyway, that's by the by. So a few other pieces. We didn't touch on Dennis Walsh's Beware the Hype thing, but he's talking about, you know, how they would prepare in the 80s and like Jack O'Shea going off playing pitch and putt the morning of the game and all this kind of stuff. And just the way the hype got a bit out of control in 82, the planning of the homecoming, there was a big, you know, Tralee versus Killarney, where does the team go kind of thing, and that became public. And then would the captain be Jack O'Shea or John Egan, because they both had a right to it, and in the end they had to put 15 pieces of paper into a hat, 13 of them blank, the others with the names of Egan and O'Shea, and the local Garda sergeant was the man deemed, he was a delegate from O'Shea's club, pulled out Egan's name. And they talk as well how like there was no GAA merchandise at the time, but obviously the whole thing then just explodes. There's a good quote from Mikey Sheehy who says, "All through the game my legs were like rubber in 82. I felt stiff, I wasn't able to move freely. I suppose it was nerves acting up." So
Yeah.
who knows?
Because there's always so much talk about hype around Dublin, which, you know, when you look at two of the Kerry newspapers during the week at 72-page supplements, you kind of wonder where the hype actually is. But I think one of the reasons why that's become redundant is the hype, when hype was a factor, say in the 90s, that was a time when you really had, in terms of daily newspapers, the Irish Times, Irish Independent, and the Irish Press, and the Examiner was exclusively Cork back then. There were no tabloids. It was before local radio station really took off, so you really only had RTE. But now, because of social media, you've got the far more newspapers, there's podcasts, everything is constant noise all the time. Like, so a final week, like next week it'll be all noise about something else, and the week, like, it might be Ireland Switzerland, or the following week it might be Rugby World Cup. So hype is constant, if you want to call that hype. So it's just not, there's no sudden spike in that, like, it's all talk about one thing or one team. It's all the time, noise all the time. Can we go on to Padraig Harrington? I thought that was really good.
Different angle.
Yeah, it was a clever idea, because people had to think a bit outside the box, because so much has been said. But just a couple of things. I'll just hold this up.
Good picture.
It's just it's a pet hate of mine. That's a brilliant portrait of Padraig Harrington, and there's no credit. And this happens a lot in newspapers. The photographer isn't credited, and I'd like to know who took the photo, because you deserve a bit of...
I half suspect that is a European Tour Ryder Cup captain photo.
Yeah, possibly, but it's still a very good photo. Well, it still deserves credit. There's a lot of stuff in this, like he talks about, because he talked to Dublin, he talked to under Jim Gavin.
I thought he was, at one stage, he was like the Drake of the GA. He talked to Dublin this year, he talked to Kilkenny in 2010, like, so he's probably like more worried than normal today.
Yeah, he talked to Ireland before they won. Yeah,
compared to Drake, I'd say.
Yeah, he talked to Ireland before they won the Grand Slam in 2009. So excuse me, but that bit is interesting, because he's talking about what he wanted to learn from them as well. But the bit that jumped out at me was he mentions he's born on the 31st of August, which is one day old for the club teams. And he thinks this is one of the main reasons he didn't go with Gaelic football, that he went with golf, which is very interesting, because there has been studies on this. Like, most Olympic athletes and professional footballers are born the first 3 months of the year. It's called the relative age effect, because you get... you're not playing kind of catch-up in an underage team, that you're a good bit younger than the other players. But so he talks about that. Because of that, he was the wrong age. He was stuck in goals, and it was a great place to play. You don't develop your skills if you're an outfielder. I played in goals then as soccer, because I played in goals in Gaelic. Automatically, it was you playing goals. He said, if you went to golfers and polled them on what sports they played, there's a huge amount of goalkeepers play golf for a couple of reasons. Goalkeeping is a selfish, mad place to play, and golf is like that. And he mentions Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers. Philip Lanigan brings it up, and he read it. Now that goes into the the date of birth dictating your sporting career. And we've read so many interviews with Padraig and listened to so many interviews. I never knew that stuff before, and that's interesting. There's always something new with it.
There is. I think quite a few countries have now gone to 6-month windows instead of year-long ones to try and really combat what happens to so many kids born in the second half of the year. You lose them; they could be brilliant.
Yeah, you're behind. You're just so far behind. You're chasing it, and unless you're very mentally strong and you have your parents keep telling you, "Oh no, it's going to change. You're eventually going to catch up."
Yeah.
It would kind of beat you down a bit.
When were you born? What time of year?
I was born in October. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were up against it.
Yeah, I was.
That's why you didn't make it with awful.
No, that's it exactly.
Because in Outliers, Gladwell talks about how it just becomes the momentum behind it becomes huge because the lads in the second half of the year don't necessarily start. They're often on the subs bench. They don't make the representative teams. So the lads born in the first half of the year are getting far more game time. They start getting better coaching. They play in the more important positions. And so you do that for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Who's going to be the better player?
Yeah.
No, it's a fair point, yeah. We often talked about strategic birth control to make sure from April onwards, so that you've been born January, February, March.
It's worth considering. There's no joke if you have that level of control over things.
Yeah.
There's some other great lines from Harrington near the end about the importance of the GA. He says,
yeah, it was good.
We'd be nowhere in sport in Ireland without the GA. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all this, but because in the schools, literally, physical education isn't taught. Now, I'm previous PE teacher, so I would disagree with that.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. Maybe he's talking about a couple of generations ago.
He said the GA has taken up the mantle. Every rugby player, every golfer, every sport is somehow touched by the GA. Most of us played it, but even if you didn't, if you play rugby, you're playing against the guy who played GA. If you play soccer, you're playing against the guy who played GA. If you play golf, you're playing against the guy who has some sort of background in it. That's what's pushing you on. And he just says, a closing question, can you imagine if we didn't have the GA, which is something I've often thought. But it is a lot of that, you look at a lot of we'll just say even, is it Conor Glass, is that his name, from Meath, who won a county senior football title there 2 years ago, and he's over in AFL. You look at, he was courted by Leinster Rugby as well. You look at the amount of guys fighting for top GA players. In Dublin now, I suppose it's much easier to attract the best players. Maybe it's easier to keep them than maybe going playing rugby and things like that. But if you look at a lot of guys that do have a serious pedigree in GA, they're good at a lot of things, but GA is one of the underlying kind of things.
And hurling people, there's a shout out for you too, very important. I was
loving this. I'm glad you're bringing this up, not me.
I thought that's what you were going to bring up at the end, actually. I didn't know you were a PE teacher, so it's a vested interest either way. He says, I know we're talking football, but I would have played hurling as a kid too. Hurling's the greatest sport in the world. There is nothing that compares to hurling. If hurling was an international sport, it would be the #1 sport. Clearly, it's highly skillful, it's very fast, high scoring, exceptionally physical. It has everything. Hurling #1 for Harrington.
Yeah, if ever, I already have lots of admiration for him already, but I've got even more now, in fairness.
It's football's day, even on football's day. Shane McGrath's making that point, actually. You mentioned that.
Yeah, because it struck me because when Tommy Walsh performed his great soliloquy a couple of weeks ago.
Which is not to everyone's taste, actually.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, but that kind of ties in with what Shane's writing about, I think, because I was actually sitting behind Tommy, and I could only half hear him. I've listened back to it since, but what struck me was his body language. He was, you talk about Robert De Niro, this was the Strasbourg method, this was method acting. He was really into it. You could see he was living every word. He'd written it down, he put a lot of thought into what he was saying, and he wanted to perform and get it out there, and he got into the full hurling man mode, basically.
He did. As a piece of writing, he would read very well on paper. There was a craft to it.
It was top class.
Really top class.
Yeah.
And then obviously the delivery was word bloody perfect. And it's hard when you set out, do it myself regularly enough. There's a script. It's a long way to the bottom.
Yeah, I'd love to hear him try a commentary, see how he'd go, a full commentary. Because
like a co-com?
No, a full, as a match commentator on hurling.
So commentate a match? Like a Dave McIntyre type?
Yeah, just to see. I'd be curious because he has got a flow of language. He can clearly write, and he has a great understanding of the game. So I'd love to know how you get on with that. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but
well, the rights are up, and
but Shane counters that by. He basically makes a stand. I think he makes valid points here. UNESCO, starts off in, there are no beautiful documentaries about football, meaning Gaelic football, the super slow-mo pastures, the haunting soundtrack. Goes on to say UNESCO have not pored over old Ulster Championship preliminary round matches to assess the sport's cultural worth. No GA president has ever agreed with the suggestion that football should be an Olympic sport. And it goes on in this light that football people and GA people as a whole talk down football a hell of a lot. Hurling people always stand up for hurling.
Yeah.
And to me, this is a brilliant day. I love All Ireland Football Final Day. I see people that I only see this day, and it's not just, they're from all over the country, but they always go to the final, and it's a sport they've been immersed in and that they love, and it can be a brilliant sport. I think today could be an amazing game. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a brilliant game. And there are times when, I remember 2 years ago, the final, we talked about this after the Dublin Mayo final, and it was. I nearly had a headache watching it because it was so good. You're trying to concentrate so much. And when you get under the skin of a game like that, and the whole meter and the rhythm of it, and the beauty and the beat, and it's special. And we don't talk about it enough.
You're dead, when it's that good, it's almost as good as hurling.
That 2017 final, lads, that was unbelievable. That was the best. That was
closest thing to hurling you've seen.
Yeah,
it was nearly as good as a bad hurling game.
Well, that was just it was so gripping. I remember we had a good few of us had all planned to go out after, and it was actually that down nearly over Mayo been beaten, and after everything they'd given, but the game was just, I remember chatting to a guy at half-time, and he told me he was getting married to a Dublin girl later on that winter, and I said, imagine, he never thought about this, I said, imagine if you had Sam Maguire up the top table. And he was just taken aback at the prospect of that. And then I was just chatting to him after, and he was just crestfallen and everything. But it is a great day. It's an unbelievable day,
It was something actually I touched on with Paul Rouse during the week. I wonder, is there an aspect of it? So you're talking about football people attack the game and pick out its faults, and hurling people almost nurture this kind of special thing. I wonder, is there almost an understanding amongst hurling people that it really only exists in small pockets in the country? This thing needs to be nurtured, cherished, supported, because it's always fighting a battle to stay as popular as it is. Whereas football is the most popular sport in the country. From a GAA point of view, certainly it's up there with soccer, I suppose. It's too big to fail. You can say what you want about football, you can call it the worst game in the world, it's not going to budge.
To be honest, Brian, because it's a cult thing, because you get that with the League of Ireland as well. I know it was originally tongue-in-cheek thing, but the hashtag greatest league in the world. But within the cult, they believe that. They believe this. We understand the real game. It's not the Premier League. It's not Manchester City or Liverpool or the Champions League. That, going to Tallaght Stadium on Friday night, there was over 7,000 people there for Rovers and Bows, and the place is hopping. He said, that's where it's at. And there's people that are really, to get an energy out of that, and hurling does as well. And it's like these people who love a band, when they go to see them in Whelan's and they suddenly take off and they're playing the 3 Arena and they say, oh, they're crap. They've lost it, they've sold out. People don't want some sports to be...
No,
I think some hurling people don't really want hurling to be a 32 county game. They like that it's in the game.
It won't be like that now at all, now, I have to say.
But Offaly is different, I think, Michael, because Offaly has a relatively recent history.
That's true. Like you talk about the last 30, 40 years.
It's enough hurling chat for one day. There's a few other people, so the clock is coming against us. Paul Kimmage is a 2-page spread made in Dublin. Again, it's a very different angle on things, where he talks to different characters of Dublin, everybody from Ray Cosgrove to Eamon Dunphy to Dermot Gilleese to various others whose names have just escaped me now. I don't have it in front of me.
But
he's trying to get a sense of what it is to be, quote, made in Dublin.
Yeah, it's about Dublin. I think it's an interesting idea, because it's something that's kind of half struck me later, because he's brought in Damien Dempsey. And I thought this about Damien Dempsey and the likes of a Lazarus Soul and Fontaine's DC, 2 other bands. They all sing with Dublin accents, which is a very recent thing. And I think there is an upsurge in Dublin pride, and I wonder, have the team tapped into that in a way? But it's an interesting angle that Paul has gone there. It's a long piece now. There's a lot of people in it. There's a few things before you get the rugby, if you're going to rugby. Just to mention, Joe, Ireland-Switzerland's on Thursday, which is a massive game in the terms of your 2020 qualification. If Ireland don't win, it could be very much a long shot whether they qualify. The Sunday Indo doesn't have a word on the game. The Mail has only a short piece by Philip Quinn, basically on the Swiss. And then there's a short piece by Paul Rowan in the Sunday Times, looking back at the Switzerland game in 2002. And it really struck me about the stature of the national team now, or its standing, as that reflected in the media coverage, because you know, you won't get many bigger games in qualifiers than this one, and it's hardly been touched on. And just, I know it's an All-Ireland final weekend and space has been squeezed, but there's a few other things on that as well. Paul O'Donovan, this time with Fintan McCarthy, won his 4th World Champions medal yesterday, and he is also an Olympic silver medalist. So he has a case for being Ireland's greatest sports person ever. Like, it's remarkable what he's done. He'll probably win Olympic gold next year. There's 4 paragraphs in the Mail on it, 6 paragraphs in the Sindo, and a bit of a longer piece in the Sunday Times. Aoife O'Rourke, the middleweight boxer, became the first female Irish boxer other than Katie Taylor to win a European title yesterday. 3 paragraphs in the Mail, 6 paragraphs in the Sindo, 6 paragraphs in the Sunday Times. And if you're in the sports outside GA soccer rugby, you feel like you're banging your head against the wall all the time. Like when you have major international success like that, and it's hardly got any coverage.
Yeah, it's true. Given that we all spent 15 minutes reading this Kimmage piece, so it would mention something
we'll
from
go into it,
like it charts, so Heffo's time and Neil Cotter, is it? Or
he wrote a great book, Chaos Years.
Dub, I think he says the context of the word Dub, the football team, that started in the 50s. Prior to that, it was a team of people living in Dublin who could have been from anywhere, and kind of talks about Heffo's desire to get real Dubs into the team. But it was just like, it does get into kind of interesting enough territory.
Yeah.
Like where you do get Eamon Dunphy saying stuff like the following. This is kind of the what I found very interesting about it. He says, they want to get to like, what is real Dublin? What are Dubs? You know, all that stuff. Dunphy, I never liked the real Dublin SH1T. I always thought it was box. No, Pearson would start going on about the Liberties, and I'd say, F you and the Liberties. F you and the Liberties. There was this romanticisation of it. Jim Sheridan was the same. Then Neil Cotter, who wrote the Chaos Years. I'd say the vast majority of Dublin fans at matches are north side, salt of the earth types. I went to Trinity, and there were a lot of people there from Dublin, but there weren't too many Dubs. Mm-hmm. And then Cotter goes on to say, this might seem like a stupid thing to say, and it might look stupid in print. Most of us, that's Dubs, have an accent. And most of the Dubs I know couldn't give a toss about the rugby team. It's a chip, we're driven by hurt. I think we rail against the perception that we're somehow lesser Gaels because we don't eat our dinner in the middle of the day. And it's not only it's not only how our country cousins perceive us, it's how the posh lads on the south side look at us as well. Back to Eamon Dunphy. That phrase, the Dubs, everything about it stinks. It really does. It's driven me away from even following them. I hope Kerry beat them. There's a headline for you. It stinks. Yeah. So there are great bits in there.
There are, but like there's a couple of things with this. There's 8 different people interviewed in it. It struck me there's no woman interview. I'd like to have heard a female voice because there's so many women involved in Dublin GA, and I just thought like some of them.
Well, even just Dubs, Dunphy's not involved.
Yeah, well, that's the thing as well. Like, there's a couple of voices there. I'm going like Eamon. I didn't think added a huge amount to it. Like I thought. I just don't think he's the knowledge on it. I think there would have been better choices.
The Dub stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple of good lines, but there's just. I think the idea is really good, but I think maybe I would have had a couple of different voices in it. It does strike me as well. There's a few people have brought this up. Like I can't remember who said it. Somebody said people from Donnybrook and Fox Rock aren't Dubs, and like so you know Dalkey's equivalent to Donnybrook and Fox Rock, and you know, is Con O'Callaghan not a Dub? Then like, I think that's quite snobbish or reverse snobbery going on there. That you know, it goes back to the Dunphy thing. You have to be for the Liberties to be a Dub, as Noel Pearson was saying.
Yeah, it's a complicated place, Dublin. As I read this, everyone has a slightly different perception.
Yeah,
kind of muddled. And there were parts around I thought, that's true of Dublin, and other parts I thought, oh geez, I don't.
Yeah, but Dublin's a very different. Like I didn't realise. It seems Dermot Keelese lives in Marino. Like I live in Marino. I didn't know Dermot lived there, but Marino's a very like the parts of Dublin that are very distinctive. Like I walk around in Dublin, Marino, going to shops or whatever. People say hello to you, like people in their garden or crossing the street, which doesn't happen in a lot of other parts of the city. Like some parts have a more village feel. I find
that's the one thing I couldn't get over about coming up here from the country. Like,
do you eat your dinner in the middle of the day?
Yeah, like 1:30, 2:00 every day. Yeah.
Carvery?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good man.
So do you really? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do, yeah. And like waving at people in the car and people not waving
While
back
having your
at you
carvery in
and
the
saying
car
hello
behind the
to
wheel.
people
I feel
walking
like you're
past,
taking the mick here.
No, I'm not. I'm genuinely not. No, that's why I love going back home, because when you're driving anywhere around the country and you see anyone that you might even half know and you wave at them and they wave you back. Like, whereas up here it's like
There's too many people to wave at everyone.
No, I live out in Blanchardstown, out in Clonsilla there, and it's not that big of a place. You're meeting people and you're just like, hello, and it's almost like some people are kind of looking at you. It's like, who's this guy with his bogger accent and why is he saying hello to me?
But I presume you're not driving around at Blanchardstown waving to every car that goes by.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No. But you know, it's just different. Yeah, it's just different. Yeah.
I like. There's no doubt the country is a friendlier place, but I just think it's population. That's the reason.
It could be a lot.
It's not practical.
Yeah.
To
Just even Darren O'Sullivan was saying earlier this week that he used to play with Kerry about not being able to go down to the shop in Kerry the week of a match because someone would be asking him, you know, who are you playing, who's marking who, or whatever. Yeah. And then he was comparing that to Dublin, and we even was chatting to Alan Brogan last night. You get it to some extent while people know you, but you are kind of your kind of face goes missing within a big crowd. You know what I mean? People don't notice you as much.
Yeah,
there'll be a lot of people walking around at 3:30 today if you leave the building who don't give a toss about this match. In Dublin is the other point. 1 point, whatever million. Not all of them are going to care.
No, and there'll be people at the game who don't give a toss. I guarantee, because I was in a shop yesterday. Now, a local shop, and there was a woman ahead of me being served, and she was talking to the man behind the counter at the game. She said, I have a ticket, yeah. I'm not from Dublin myself, but I don't want to miss the 5 in a row. And she had a ticket. She had no interest, but she just wanted to be there. This is a big deal.
One of the lads out there working was saying he goes to quite a few Dublin games, been to a lot of semi-finals. He's never been able to get a ticket for Dublin in a final.
Yeah.
He couldn't this time, so he said, I'll take the shift today. So he's in working today. But isn't that, there's just something so wrong about that.
Yeah. An American comedian, Josh Prey, who went fairly viral over his reaction to hurling. And
what's
like
your
that.
Take on that?
It's one ticket for one person, and I think it's probably not bad PR on the GA's point of view. I think between the tourism board and the GA, they've kind of flown him over or have given him a ticket or whatever.
I haven't seen any positive reaction to it.
Well, Mick McCarthy, who on Balls, Mick made a decent point about it. Like, if you looked at the crowds at Dublin and Kerry games this year, you know, it's hard to make the case, he's depriving a true Gael of a ticket.
Fair enough.
You know, there's a lot of people now clamouring for tickets for this game and haven't been seen at a Dublin game all year or a Kerry game all year. So your sympathy can be a bit limited that way.
The horrible thought is the people who were at those games.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But a lot of those, a lot of the people who are regular, are season ticket holders. I thought there was an interesting stuff here about Kevin Heffernan. Because of Tommy Carr, if you remember, hurling-wise, Declan Carr...
This isn't the Kimmage piece.
Yeah, like Declan Carr's brother captained Tipperary to All-Ireland hurling titles. So, you know, they'd mixed allegiances. So he says Heffernan actually took him aside when he came in and quizzed him about his background to see, are you an actual dub? Like, should you be here? Are you not a tip man? You know?
And even in the chaos years, Tommy Carr always felt like he was an outsider and thought he was treated like an outsider. He wasn't in inverted commas true dub.
And felt guilty over denying his roots in interviews. And by the way, I'm not Tipperary, but equally the Dubs didn't quite trust him either.
That's a great book. It's still in print. If anybody wants to read it, really interesting.
There's something about misery and losing that just makes it more interesting than winning.
And there's just there were a generation of great talkers, like the likes of Keith Barr and stuff, Eamon Heary, etc. Charlie Redmond's in there. There's loads of great talkers. So.
To give you broadly, then rest of the papers as we begin to wrap this up and let the lads get to Croke Park. There's bits on the rugby, like there's a general sense from Neil Francis and others that things have improved a little bit. David Walsh does touch on something which probably has not got the coverage it deserves, you know. Rugby must finally wake up to the scourge of doping. Yeah. So, Afoe Dianti tested positive the other week. The test, it was revealed the other week. The test happened July 2nd, South Africa training camp. The sample was found to contain 3 Class 1 banned substances. And it seems he's been banned for 4 years, although he denies it, we should stress. He insists he would never cheat. And he's not sure how it's happened or whatever. Maybe a contamination is his case. But here's almost the point. This really hasn't been... I haven't seen it like in lots of different places or heard it talked about. And he says, here's the bit that's hard to understand, says Walsh. In 2018, Deanty was World Rugby's, quote, breakout player of the year. So he won the award, kind of, I guess, world's best young player or breakout player. He is one of the game's most exciting players. 3 months before the start of the sport's biggest tournament, the World Cup, he tests positive. It should be a huge scandal, but judging by the relatively muted reaction, it isn't. What if one of football's best young players tested positive just before a big tournament? It would be a major scandal. Rassie Erasmus, he said he didn't know about the positive test when he was selecting his World Cup squad. And Walsh says, you may imagine Deanty's case to be an isolated one, but that's not the reality. Doping is something rugby needs to talk about. And that, when you put it like that, you know, this guy burst on the scene last year. He scored 2 tries against the All Blacks in Wellington. Like a big emerging star, 25 years old, but, you know, just emerging in the test arena of late. And he's again, he denies it, but he has most certainly, and the B sample as well, tested positive for 3 different Class 1 banned substances, anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
So,
what jumps out at me is the analogy he makes there, like if this was another sport.
That's the point.
That's the thing, like if it was 3 months before the World Cup in Russia and Dybala had tested positive, it would be massive. Like you were going, this is the guy, young guy we're looking at as a potential star of the World Cup. And clearly this guy was as well, because I know they're probably coming up against Ireland, but you would fancy them maybe to make the last 4 of the final, South Africa, the way they've been going. And he could have been one of their main men. And it's strange, it just jumped out at me because it hasn't really registered this story.
Yeah.
I've read it and I go, because I'm not that familiar with his name. No, I haven't been watching him that much.
Yeah.
But there should be more of it. And when you do look at the UK figures, there's more rugby positives than any other sport, way ahead of athletics or cycling, which everybody thinks are filthy sports. And a lot of those are in amateur or semi-pro rugby. And you would think if it's happening at those levels, it has to be happening at higher levels where there's actual real rewards and tangible rewards in shape, financial and so on, that you can't be immune to it.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that case. I mean, it has been muted. You would have to concede that point, that's for sure. Yes, so there's rugby coverage. Like the general sense is much improved and it's calmed everything down a bit. But like Neil Francis says, this was a bunch of Pro 14 players going up against a bunch of other Pro 14 players. Maybe slightly harsh in some cases, but and a few other. Everyone's saying Jack Conan absolutely. Has to start ahead of CJ Stander as well. A few people are saying that. Peter O'Reilly makes one point just to mark your card, because I think a lot of people had been impressed with Chris Farrell and he set up Joey Carberry for that try against Italy. But Will Addison did very well yesterday if you didn't see the game. And so, or is it Brennan Fanning? Sorry, I'm getting lost in pages here. But it seems Chris Farrell could be in trouble. Or maybe it's Fanning. Maybe it's Fanning over in the Sunday Independent. I'll just turn to it very quickly and give it to you. Yeah, it is. It's Brennan Fanning, Sunday Independent. So basically Joe Schmidt is going to call them tomorrow and then send the email of the squad over to the World Cup, but actually not name it publicly until next Sunday. Rory O'Connor makes the point, that's a long time to contain big news, But he says of the situation in the back line that Will Addison did very well. He's a player that's now hard to resist, despite being short in match practice. He's the most versatile operator in the squad. He did well yesterday. If Schmidt sticks to his 5 at half-back plan, as in 3 out-halves and 2 scrum-halves, then Andrew Conway and Addison should both make the cut, with Chris Farrell losing out, which would be interesting. So the way Fanning sees it is Carney and Larmour at full-backs. 14 to 11 would be Keith Earls has to go, Stockdale has to go, Conway has done very well, and now Will Addison in. And then centres, Ringrose, Henshaw, Aki is how he sees things. So that would be a big omission, Chris Farrell, because I think...
Yeah, well, whatever happens, there's going to be a couple of really good players left at home.
It seems that way now. Yeah. Look, and then there'll be injuries, won't there be?
Yeah.
Just on the point Stephen Jones makes, how is it possible that Ireland could have ended up ranked world number 1 yesterday if they'd beaten Wales by a certain amount of points?
I know. Well, at one point when they were more than 15 up, they were the world's number 1 team. They haven't played well since autumn.
That's bizarre. Like that much stock is taken on a pre-tournament game of little significance is bizarre.
Yeah. Neil Francis, by the way, says this was only a warm-up game, but it's worth noting Ireland had 10 offloads in 80 minutes, more than their entire number during the Six Nations. This is most un-Joe-like. And he wonders, did the players disobey him, or does he now realise that to undo the power sides, you either have to kick really well, which Ireland haven't of late, or you have to offload and pass slickly.
And I was wondering, is this something else? Is it because they're getting nearer to World Cup, there's one more warm-up game, that this is something they're kept in their locker and now they're starting to show it?
Yeah.
Possibly that as well.
Yeah.
Just chatting to someone about Schmidt yesterday, and they said, of all the managers that they've ever come across with someone with a rugby background, he's the only one they've ever seen that can continuously change and continuously, it never gets to, every manager eventually, the majority of them get stale and old, and their methods they run away with the times basically to get lost. And he said he's the one person that has continuously been able to adapt. And I'm just wondering on what you're saying there, is there something a bit more that we haven't seen yet? I'm hoping that there is. Given everything that we've known about him, you'd imagine there's something left in the locker.
You'd hope so. Green shoots a recovery is the headline on the Neil Francis piece, so maybe. Before we go then, the Racing Post. We don't often touch on the Racing Post, probably to our shame really, but there's loads of good stuff in it. And Michael, you picked out an interview with Oisin Murphy, who may not be a household name or someone that, you know, is as a massive profile, but I mean, he should really.
Yeah, no, Oisin Murphy's an unbelievably interesting character. The day that's in it, he's from Kerry, obviously, as well. He's from Killarney. He's 23. He's like, you see a picture of him here, and just hold it up, like, he's literally a baby-faced assassin. Like, he looks like a chap. Like, he looks like he's about 12.
Not shaving every day, I'd say.
No, probably not. But like in the last year to 18 months, like he's in the reckoning to be the world's best jockey. Like he's in unbelievable form. He rides Grade 1 winners, Group 1 winners all around the world, Japan, England, Ireland, everywhere.
I guess the flat doesn't have quite the same profile.
Probably
here.
not, no. There's probably not the same love there for the flat. But his profile is just going to get bigger and bigger. He's probably going to be champion flat jockey in England this year as well. There's just one piece I'd just like to read out from it.
Yeah.
It's a text conversation with Frankie Dettori after Frankie had a big winner, one of his many big winners in recent days, and he just said, I texted Frankie after he made all to win the Irish Oaks. I wrote, class ride, and sent him the chart of the race sectional, so basically the timings of the race. He texted me back and said, kid, riding horses is all about feeling. If you want to be the best, use your instincts. This is advice for free. I hope you'll understand. You have a natural talent, so use it. Like, isn't that great to see the relationship amongst two professionals fighting for winners, fighting for everything? And even Oisin Murphy, he's just a lovely fella, and he just said, one quote here is, regardless of being a good jockey, it's important to me to be a good person. I was brought up to be a nice child. So like I think he's nephew of Jim Cullity, who rode Best Mate to win the Gold Cup 3 times and won the Grand National with I can't think of the name of the horse now, Binderee. He's not a household name, but he probably should be. Like he's retained jockey for Qatar Racing, which is one of the biggest jobs in racing as well. It's just because he left Ireland probably to become so big. He was champion apprentice in England in 2014. But he comes back to Ireland every now and then. If he's not a massive deal already to people, he will be in the next few years, definitely.
It's a good piece as well, across 3 pages, so that's worth checking out if you're a racing fan in the Racing Post today.
That's by Lee Mottershead, as well, in the Racing Post.
Yeah, it's the main interview in the paper today there. So that is us done for the paper review. For people listening after the All-Ireland final, give me your prediction and the margin, so that people can laugh at how little you knew about what was going to happen.
It'd be Dublin by minimum of 5.
Okay.
It could be tight for stages. I hope it is, and I hope it's not the case where Tommy Walsh is coming in when the game is over. But I think it's just, what's Dublin's best line? Their full forward line. What's Kerry's weakest line? Probably their full back line. You can stop 1 or 2 guys, but like literally you're talking about matchups and you're talking Kerry, put this guy and this guy. It's all...
You run out of Kerry people.
Yeah, you really do, yeah. And then they just have the couple of subs to come in that'll tip the balance. And just interestingly, Darren Daly's in the 26 again. Darren Daly, probably the most unheralded footballer in the history of Gaelic football, has featured in, I think, 5 of their All-Ireland wins so far, and could feature at some stage today and could end up with 7 All-Irelands. And I'd say if he walked around Dublin, nobody would know him.
Yeah.
It's mad. Like.
Yeah, it's a good point. So Dublin by?
I'm going to say 5 or more.
5 or more?
Yeah.
Cheating.
Yeah, I think Dublin will win with a bit to spare, 4-6. I think Diarmuid Connolly will have a say.
Okay.
They might need him off the bench, and I think David Clifford is going to have a huge game, but it won't be enough.
Okay, good. I hope I'm wrong. I think Dublin by 8-10. But I'm hoping for a good game. Fellas, thanks so much. You got to get to Croke Park. We'll be live on the air at 1 o'clock. If you're watching us live, we'll be on from 1 with people joining us from Croke Park. Conor Deegan from the Down team in 94 will check in with us there, the men in the suits today, and Anthony Mould was there for us as well. Kieran Cunningham from The Star, who'll be writing about this tomorrow, and Michael Verney, I'm sure, as well, in the Irish Independent. And that's us done.